All right, thanks, Kev. Thanks, Louis. So my name is Steve. I'm the senior marketing manager here at eCity. I just want to reiterate, thanks to everybody for coming. I think we've got a really cool conversation in store tonight. Thanks very much to the four people next to me. I'm going to let them each introduce themselves as we get started, but I thought I'd just set the table for why we're having this conversation in the first place. So let's talk about why we're here. So this is not news to anybody who's in this room, but education and education marketing have undergone a pretty dynamic shift in the last decade plus. Fewer students actually nationally are applying to college now, but for the students who are, they're applying to more colleges. If you consider in 1990, 9% of college-bound students applied to 7 or more schools. That number has jumped up to a little over 30% now. It's a massive shift from 9% to more than a third. Those students are also way more in control now than they used to be. We have an agency podcast, the hashtag Higher Ed podcast. This is my personal plug to go listen to the hashtag Higher Ed podcast. And we had a VP of enrollment on the show, and I think he summed it up pretty well. And he talked about back when his generation was going to school, the school held all of the cards, and if they accepted you, it was like they were doing you a favor. I know personally when I was accepted to school, even I was like, oh, yes, I have a future, I'm okay, yes, whatever, full tuition, you got it. It's just not the case anymore. Students have so much information at their fingertips, they do their research, they're just much more empowered. And then whether we're talking about prospective students, current students, alumni, donors, we are competing with so much more competition now for attention. This idea of content shock says that we can only consume so much content, but the amount of content keeps increasing at a pace that we just can't keep up with. The average US consumer now consumes 60 hours of content a week. When you break it down, that's an obscene amount of content. You can't go much further. The average person gets 88 emails a day. That probably sounds pretty accurate to some of you in the crowd. It's a lot of emails. It's hard to reach your target audience. So we have a lot to talk about, and let's just jump right into it. So before I get into the panel structure, I want to just give our panelists a chance to introduce themselves.
Hi. Hello, everyone. I am Emily Spitali. I'm Associate Vice President for Strategic Marketing and Communications at Temple University. In case you don't know much about Temple, it's a pretty large public institution in North Philadelphia. We have 40,000 students total, a little over 30,000 undergrads, and 17 schools and colleges, just to give you a little bit of perspective.
And in contrast to that, my name is Tricia O'Neill, and I'm a little bit of the, one of these things that's not like the other. I'm actually not in higher ed, but I work at the Peddie School in Hightstown, New Jersey, which is an independent boarding and day school for grades 9 through 12 in PG. And I do web strategy and communications for the school.
Hello everybody, my name is Eric Greenberg. I work as the Senior Director of Marketing Technology at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, just down the street from here. I've been there for about 10 years, and I have about 20 years of technology experience, and sort of started off my career in web and application programming, and I'm now involved in the wonderful world of Salesforce, inbound marketing, and all that good stuff. Over to you, Ira.
I'm a Rubian. I work as the head of marketing communications up at Lehigh University. It's a private institution up in the Lehigh Valley. Little different sales scale than Temple or Wharton or Penn. So we have about 6,000 students altogether, mostly undergrad, about 4,500 undergrad. Not going back too far, but I was in consumer products goods marketing, doing Matchbox toys and Graco baby products for about 12 years, and then made this switch into higher ed a lot because of the reasons of this panel, which was I just thought higher ed was quite behind and is quite behind in digital marketing and competing in it in that way, and that's the transition I made because I thought that you could have a lot of big impact besides having a passion for the industry. So I was at Wharton with Eric for about 4 years, and I've been up at Lehigh for the last 4.
So we've broken this panel into 4 sections using this particular marketing methodology, and this structure can actually be used in each segment of higher ed. Tonight, for the purposes of this conversation, we're actually taking a little bit wider of a view here. And so for the first 3 phases here that we'll be discussing, it's going to be primarily targeted to prospective student marketing. And then in the light phase at the end here, we'll really get into using current students as brand ambassadors and also alumni relations. So let's jump right in. And I guess to kind of start off with a little bit of a broad view, you mentioned even just you, Emily, and Tricia, that you came from very different backgrounds. So, and everyone comes from a pretty unique background. So I was wondering if you could just kind of give a brief synopsis of kind of what your school's primary marketing message might be.
Okay. So our primary, we are, as I said, a high school, 9 through 12 high school. We are, our primary message is probably that we are an academically rigorous institution and that we sort of take pride in bringing students further than they believe that they can go from the start. So our, we've tracked our kids' SSAT scores coming in compared with their test scores going out, and in terms of predictability, they are higher on the way out than they were predicted to be. So so that's it. And then the secondary part, which is a little bit trickier to market, is the sense of community that we provide for students, both the day and the boarding students.
So for Temple, I actually told Steve and the folks here that I actually think this is a trick question because what your message is, which we will talk about, can be very specific depending on who you're talking to, obviously. But for Temple, our value proposition, our brand is about tenacity. It's about finding solutions. It's about being Temple made and making your way. But what is really important about what we're going to talk about, I think, today is how you use that value proposition or how you use your messages at different points in your conversation with your audiences. And one of the things that I do want to say about messaging, especially for prospective students and their parents, and then that extends to reputation and rankings, is for us it's increasingly becoming more about outcomes. So that's a very, very important message for us.
So not being as involved in content strategy, I'm going to answer this from my own perspective, which is, we now are in a time when brand is not so much what we tell people it is, but what they're telling each other it is. So from my particular perspective, I'm more interested in the words and phrases and sentiments that people are using to get to our digital assets and doubling down on the ones that work and basically eliminating the ones that don't. And yes, there's of course a lot of guiding that can happen in there, but that's when I begin to partner with our content strategists. So I'll leave it at that.
One thing I would echo is it is a loaded question, and in all higher ed institutions almost say the same thing in a way when you look at it. Obviously we're trying to educate, but they all obviously have a different flavor to it. There's kind of like 5 key brand attributes that we try to reinforce in a lot of our content, whether it's sort of a practical application, Lehigh students are doers, even something that we posted today about on decision day, which is today, is just about sort of like welcome to the Lehigh family, because it is more of a family aspect, and scale has something to do with it, that as well as other things, and that maybe bleeds into your alumni question. So yeah, that's in general our general message to undergrads, but then grads start to be all different between the 4 different colleges that we have, and then it starts to decentralize from there, which it does at most places.
You all have been in higher ed for a number of years now, and the talk of this panel is obviously digital's new role in marketing or education marketing. So I'm curious to know, in each of your perspectives and the different roles you've had, what the number one biggest shift has been digitally since, and the impact that's had on your careers from the time that you started to where we are now. And we can start opposite order if you want. I don't want to make Emily go first.
The biggest shift, I think, is this whole notion of self-publishing your website. It used to be, the classic thing used to be you get PR for you're an institution, and that's how you sort of attracted people, and the rankings came out in a book, right? But now you can self-publish, and you can drive people and tell them your own message. So I think that's the biggest shift, especially just social media. There are now social media roles, same thing we did, brought to Wharton, we brought to Lehigh, is that whole ability to self-publish, which was, sort of a big deal, as well as I think the need to compete now. Whereas, you're talking about these things, for the longest time, a lot of these places, all these places, didn't really need to necessarily compete to find the students, and then there's just this digital avenue for self-publishing, or CRM systems, or whatever it is, that now you really have the tools to start to compete. Plus, we had to. I think as just things got more competitive and kids went to applying to more schools and less kids applying to those schools. So.
So I think that we're still at the very beginning of what this biggest transition is. And the way I think about it is an idea for what Web 1.0 was, in my mind, this idea of using technology to amplify analog processes. And in my mind, Web 2.0 is the idea that we can completely transform the ways of engaging with people through the platforms that we now have available to us. So it's not just about repeating, like email blasts are evolved from direct mail, but how do we now engage in a much more personalized, relevant manner across all of our digital platforms? And that's something that, being all in higher ed, you probably know is still in very nascent stages. But I really think that this is sort of the beginning of that, and what are the technologies, what are the platforms, people, and processes that are needed to actually address this transformational period?
And I think I would just add that the consumers are so much savvier. Even our 13-year-old consumers are much savvier than they were 10 years ago. And the idea of sort of personalizing the content, but also being very cognizant and intentional about the platforms and how the content spreads across those platforms and what's the best way to speak to your audience. And then additionally, I think just the reduction in the amount that people read, and the increase in visual.
I agree with everything that everyone has said so far, but I really think that for me and for our team and where we are, one of the biggest differences has been the access to data and analytics, and being able to understand in a way that I don't think we did before about behavior and preferences, and that has given us the ability to use that information, use that data to really be much more nimble than we have ever been, and we're still working on that, and it gives us the ability to really pivot when we need to.
And I think the one thing that I would say, and I think Ira, you alluded to this, and I don't want to shock anybody in this room, but higher ed has a reputation of being kind of a laggard when it comes to, again, shocking. I see on your faces, you're shocked by that. I'm curious if you agree, and Ira and Eric, I'm looking at you both in particular because I know that you deal with this in terms of trying to build the right team. So I'm curious if you agree that higher ed is a laggard, and then how you're trying to react to that within your own departments and teams.
Sure, well, I think the data would prove that higher ed is probably a laggard, but in a lot of these spaces, this is a new space for a lot of industries, especially as we get into inbound marketing and what does that look like and being personalized and relevant. Personally, and maybe Ira can vouch for this, seeing as I once worked for Ira, that I've always found it better to ask forgiveness than ask permission, and work with a small group of people to basically begin prototyping what we want to try to accomplish, and essentially a minimum viable product, and trying to grow from there, rather than trying to get the buy-in from a large group of people who probably have no idea what you're talking about.
So again, going back to why I got into higher ed, is I thought there could be a lot of impact from some actually basic marketing principles that can be applied anywhere from knowing your customer, as far as research, to different marketing tactics. And I just thought that they could have a lot of influence and help, frankly, to kind of drag them in. And we talked about this a little bit before, even how some of the roles have changed. I mean, in the last 5 years, there's been a whole bunch of new chief marketing officers at institutions reporting directly to the president. again, because you have to compete. They really do have to compete now, or maybe there's less alumni giving, so they get more pressures to really say, oh, I guess we do have to market ourselves, which is usually like a word you're not supposed to use in higher ed because it's so pure, but now competitively you have to have the lights on and compete and find students and get them to graduate. So yes, I totally agree, with the sentiment as far as sort of dragging them into the digital divide, and then it's just, as Eric was saying, just managing some of the politics of how can you get that done, and where can you find those pockets, whether it's directly or indirectly, to prototype or drag them sort of into the new age. And maybe that's new roles, like a social media manager role, which 8 years ago you never had, or a CRM role, which I'm trying to advocate for now, which we've never had. Again, that's a lot of like, how do you move an agenda in higher ed, which is, I'm sure, a whole.
Well, then let's talk about this attract phase in particular, and just trying to amplify your message to reach the audience that you need to reach. I'm curious about what tactics digitally are your most successful right now in terms of kind of breaking through the clutter and reaching your target audience. And Emily, at the risk of repetition, I'm going to let you go first. I gave you 2 questions off.
Okay. So again, for us, it goes back to what we know about our audiences. So we have found the most success when we can really understand where our prospective students, graduate and undergraduate, are in their journey. So we have a couple of, we've done some what some might call innovative technology things, like BuzzFeed, and we were one of I think the first schools to be on Snapchat, and we did that overnight, and that goes back to that being nimble. But it's really not about those things. It's not about the shiny objects. It's really more about understanding where they are in the journey and then meeting them where they are. And it's becoming sort of buzzwords and jargony, I guess, at this point for marketing people, but it's really the most important thing. When we can do that, we can see the needle move. We can see the response. We can see the engagement increase. Aside from specific tactics, I think that's the most important piece to all of this and to being successfour.
Yeah, and I would add to that, just authenticity is a big part of that. For our prospective families, our parents and students, social media engagement is key, and they're being able to engage and see the students and alums in our community engaging is really helpful.
So, without a doubt, organic search is by far our Wharton's biggest asset. But in a lot of ways, that's not really fair, because Wharton's been around for 130 years and has a very well-known brand and its particular demographic. You look at the top 10 key phrases that people find our school with, and it's Wharton this or that.
Yeah.
But if I move past that, and I would go into the social area, both organic social and paid social, where we definitely can move the needle with paid social. If there's something that we want to move the needle for, we can do that. And that has become even more attractive, because the more we know about people, the more targeted our lists can become on paid social, and we can really begin to drive down the costs of conversions at that point. And actually, I'm sorry, I just ended with saying that paid search and display has actually not been that big of a needle mover for us. It definitely still contributes, but it's not as big as we would have thought at one point in time.
So to piggyback off the SEO stuff, we really just started that as a team, I'd say like a year ago, seriously looking into that as far as a way. We don't do any kind of paid search or really paid advertising per se, so that's been a big sort of learning curve for the whole team. I guess the other thing I would point to is one thing that we've taken a very hard look at in the last couple of years, since, again, we have a beautiful campus and we just need to get people usually to visit it, to really what college is like. And so I've spent a lot of time as I've come in looking at that, and I just think about some of the digital additions we've made to that. So for example, we get about 35,000 parents and students through our buildings a year, and these are very high value customers. I mean, they've come, they visited, and we have something great to show them. So I mean, really focusing on it. We weren't really treating it as a sort of I'd say a $250,000 tour what you're looking at as far as what the education that we're selling. And so some of the things that we've done, again, we've done a virtual tour that we invested in, again, off this beautiful campus, and that we had 20,000 people take that tour and spend an average of like 10 minutes on it. We added languages to it. Again, we physically want to get them there, but as you want to grow like internationally or anything, so anyway, that's been like beyond my wildest dreams as far as just augmenting that. But that's an asset that we weren't leveraging, I think, as much digitally. So that's just an example of looking at the whole visitor experience, but very specifically maybe digitally, what we did, and that was kind of to my surprise. It was a little bit of a test case to see how that would do, but the metrics that you can get for that really was like blew us away as far as accessing that kind of content.
Emily and Trish, you both mentioned the user research and how, right, there's a lot of shiny tools, and you need to know where your audience is and meet them at that journey. So I'm curious if you could elaborate a little bit on how you're actually going about that. How are you going about your user research? Is it organic, in-house? Are you using third-party resources? Can you take me through that process a little bit? And Trish, I'll let you.
Ours is probably a lot simpler than yours. But actually, a lot of the work that we did with Lewis and eCity in our redesign of our website is persona-driven. So we're trying to do content marketing specific to our individual personas, and it's sort of helped us to rethink the way that we're looking at that. So I mean that's probably pretty simple, but I think it's going to be driving a lot of our strategy from here on.
For us, we are looking at several different types of research inputs, and that's an ongoing process. We start with market research. We start with understanding prospective graduate and undergraduate students. National research tells us that they ask 4 questions from the beginning of their journey. Do you have my major? How much will it cost? Can I pay for it? Where is it located? Which I think goes back to what you were saying about location is a huge selling point for students, and for students who want an urban campus, that's really important for us. And will I fit in? What's it like there? And the student life questions. So we start there, and then we build from there and find out as much as we can as they move through the journey. One of the things that we're doing from an SEO perspective and from that digital experience, I'm actually struggling to not say websites anymore, but which is hard when you're talking to a lot of faculty. But we're building, we're completely overhauling temple.edu and creating what is a new digital experience that's the foundation is in content, and content that's born out of research and understanding our users. So that is telling us a lot about our users, and we're able to throw up some prototypes and things like that, and then test. And we do a lot of testing. So it's an ongoing kind of a cycle that we're in to understand as much as we can. And it's something that we're growing in our team. So, for those of you who are part of newer teams or have, the benefit of being part of growing a team, the connection between IT and marketing and research and getting at least some kind of formal institutional research functionality on your teams would be, I would suggest, one of the first things that you do if you have that ability.
And when you mentioned BuzzFeed earlier, you're publishing on BuzzFeed, and Ira, you mentioned this whole idea of self-publishing. And I'm curious, Ira, for you and Eric, because Eric mentioned organic search being such a driver for Wharton. If you could talk a little bit about the balance between trying to publish on your own site, your own domain, your own properties, your own digital experiences, versus maybe having to self-publish and maybe publishing on third-party platforms if it's applicable to your universities.
Well, I'd say at this point we're probably pretty resource-strained to get to the third-party part of it. I think we're aware and we kind of look to see what's going on, but very much focus on, and we have a pretty robust internal team about with the self-publishing. So, for example, we've done some test cases. We put together a millennial slang video, so we had professors read and try to figure out what some of these slang things, and we put that up as sort of like a PR idea, USA Today picked it up, and we had 220,000 people view that video. For us, that's like crazy awareness, but that was just a self-publishing idea that our team had, and we, I'm not saying we have those every day, but just an example a little bit on the digital side of what you can get out of self-publishing, especially on the awareness side of it. So, but I would say as far as the third-party stuff and getting involved in it, I think we're just resource constrained to get. I'd love to get to that next level, but probably just not there.
I'd say Wharton is in a pretty similar spot that way. We don't really need to do a whole lot of third-party publishing, but what has become the challenge in the sort of self-publishing has been the the growth of all these web pages everywhere that people can create at the drop of a hat, and sort of the search engine cannibalization that takes place amongst these websites, and how to try to somehow, I guess herding cats is what the actual metaphor is, and trying to figure out the best way to create strategies from a central marketing effort to harness that. And to an extent, we have really begun in more earnest a self-publishing area of our web experience, specifically in order to grow our centralized managed SEO footprint, with the hopes that we can begin over time to act sort of as a traffic cop and direct people to where they might be wanting to get to, rather than 17 websites are competing for the key phrase Wharton Global, and Google doesn't know where to point them.
Okay. And I was wondering if we could talk, just move maybe a little bit to, if we could talk about secondary audiences a little bit, because, and Trish, especially for you, you have a younger demographic, like you mentioned. Students, of course, are going to be this first primary audience. They're the ones, we can say that they're the ones who are making this ultimate decision, but there are a lot of secondary audiences that play a role, whether it's a parent, whether it's a guidance counselor. For international students, whether it's a pathway company or some, the like. So I was wondering if you could maybe, and we'll open this up to everyone, but Tricia, if you could start maybe by just talking about how you market to, these secondary audiences, and if it differs from the primary audience of the prospective students themselves.
So our secondary audience is actually a second primary audience almost, because parents and students are pretty much equally involved in the process of selecting their school when the kids are 13, 14 years old, and it alternates. Whether it's parent or student driven is pretty much divided down the middle. With that, it starts as simply as having parents in the waiting room, and then moving that to the digital experience, right? Making sure that our parents are advocating the authentic relationship. Making sure that that the parents are out there word of mouth. That's sort of the secondary primary audience part of it, and then a lot of what we've done in our little world with independent schools is form these consortiums. So we have the Mid-Atlantic boarding schools who will gather together and increase awareness of the independent and boarding school experience at large.
Is there a certain time when secondary audiences become more involved in this marketing? Are you trying to do it right from the get-go? Is it more of a, now the student's trying to make this decision and they accept it, and now it's about where to go, and now you really need to focus on the secondary audiences? Or? For us,
for the higher ed, it's probably different, but for us, it's pretty much right from the get-go. We're marketing to both audiences, and it alternates in individual families. So sometimes the parents are filling out the forms as the students in our world. So, yeah.
Gotcha. If we move forward to kind of lead generation, if you will, I think traditionally it was a pretty easy process. Colleges would buy lists, and still do buy plenty of lists when students take their SATs or ACTs, or a student would go to a college fair and fill out an information card, and then the schools would act accordingly. But and Eric, you mentioned in particular how much Google is helping Wharton, so maybe I'll let you start. But I'm curious about how you're going about organically capturing leads beyond things like list buys or student info cards. How are you kind of putting your websites to work in that way? Thanks.
So again, to echo what's been said a lot, it really depends on the program that we're working with. If it's one of the larger programs, then we put a lot of effort into both making sure that we have forms and ways of capturing people's information on pretty much every page. We also have begun a much more robust landing page strategy to work in coordination with our social media marketing. And additionally, one of the things that I'm pretty excited that we've done recently is move into the what's called Salesforce Communities, which is a closed social network. As I was saying to somebody else, imagine if you could just take Facebook's code base, brand it with your school, close it to a certain group of people, and then make it just available to them with all that data feeding back into Salesforce. It provides us the opportunity to really begin capturing a lot of data on how people what people are interested in, and in turn be able to reach out to them within this mobile-friendly community or via email to try to get them to move to the next step of the journey. And we've also spent quite a lot of time investing a lot of time in creating a very granular marketing funnel. So at one point in time, we might have just had a website with an application button on it, and whatever happened between the time someone first visited the website and the time they clicked the application button is anybody's guess. It could have been 18 months, who knows what they were doing. Now we're able to really market people at the different stages, whether they're a lead, a marketing qualified lead, what we call an admissions qualified lead, all the way down to when they start and hopefully submit an application.
And how are you making that, sorry, not to pick on you at this point, how are you making that determination? Is it different types of content that they're downloading, or different calls to action that they're submitting? How are you making that determination?
Sure. So part of it depends on what are the parameters that the program is looking for. So right off the bat, if we can capture their name and email somewhere, then they'll just be considered a lead. And our next jump would be to move them into a marketing qualified lead. And so we would look to do a couple of things. Either the admissions directors met them and they just said, yes, these people are fantastic, or we set up a variety of rules. We're using HubSpot right now, automated rules that says that they have come back for at least 3 visits and visited these 5 pages, including the application requirements. And if they have X amount of years of experience that we're looking for, then move them into marketing qualified area, and we will begin to email target them that way. And we will also at that point send out an invitation to join this Salesforce community that's explicitly meant for largely very qualified leads. And once they're in there, as I said, we can begin to identify what their self-selected interests are and begin to provide the content to get and the connections to get them to the next step of that journey.
And I'll let if anyone else wants to talk about this, I'll let them. I don't want to. Excellent. Okay. Can we talk about list buying a little bit? And I know we're transitioning a little bit into, I guess, more of an admissions realm here. But I'm curious about what role marketing is playing. How are you integrating with admissions, if at all, to make the most of the data you're collecting with the list buy, with the data you're updating in that method?
Well, my understanding is, again, with our admissions office, is they definitely transitioned to really not buying any lists. I think most of their spend is actually with Chegg, where students, if you're not familiar with it, kind of look at, suggest certain schools. So they're already somewhat interested, and then we get those leads. And I think that's the majority, actually, of their spend and the leads we get, besides the organic ones who just come to the Lehigh site because, and then we can capture that, and we're definitely farther behind the CRM part of that. We're just still starting with that. So anyway, that's my understanding as far as different lists, besides maybe some other segments like maybe first gen or low income students, where obviously you have to work maybe a little bit harder to find and get some of those leads.
One of the things when you don't have all of those wonderful things in place like you do at Wharton, one of the things that I did want to say is that, and you may or may not relate, but I think, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, it depends on, what the dynamic is, quite frankly, and where we're a central marketing team and we're working with a central admissions team, but there are also admissions folks and marketing folks, and we have 17 schools and colleges. So on the undergraduate side as well as the graduate side, graduate admissions is not centralized. So the point is there can be lots and lots of factors at play, lots and lots of variables that are impacting what you do and how you do it and how successful you are. And for us, it was as far as the digital experience and how we were bringing students in through search and through the website. It was one place that we could start, but it's been a process. It's been a process over the last few years, working with our enrollment management team and sharing information, and sometimes you have to do a lot of that upfront legwork and building relationships or rebuilding relationships before you can even talk about some of these. We don't even have centralized CRM. There could be lots and lots of things that you kind of have to wade through. So. That's one of the, you kind of have to take a step back and look at what you're dealing with and tackle the things that you can tackle, and it's a little bit of a systematic process. But it can be very difficult and challenging, and we're probably all in either similar boats or, facing very different challenges in our institutions.
So that's a really good distinction, especially when we're talking about graduate versus undergraduate or even K through 12. Those are just so different situations. So my caveat to my answer before was we launched a 1-year MBA program for the first time last year. For sure they bought GMAT lists, for that. And then again, that's not centralized, that's decentralized. And I know they probably did actually a whole lot of work to fill that first class totally differently than we would on the undergraduate side. So again, situation.
Yeah.
I think as you kind of move through the process here, for students who maybe have been accepted and now we're into yield season and culminating for a lot of schools, not every school, but in decision day today, how are your schools handling content personalization? And I don't mean just saying your first name and an email, but we're not Netflix, we're not Pandora, we're not queuing it up maybe to that level, but I'd be curious if you could take me through, if at all, how your schools are approaching giving students the information, the content that they want. If you're using data to do that at all, I know it's a very decentralized environment for a lot of folks, but any insight you can share on how you're trying to give students the content that they want.
Eric.
Okay, well. All right, really, so forget the highfalutin answer. Really, I say we're approaching
Let's go to the next one.
Yeah, we're approaching it with optimism and all the promise of personalization. We've had, so I can say we're a couple of years into all of these things being developed, and I'd say we're several years away from being able to use them really effectively. And it's one thing that, especially people at an executive level at a university don't like to hear, is the length of time it's going to take to actually do these things, because it is an extremely iterative process, and we don't have 2-week sales cycles. We've got 12-month cycles, and so you get something out there and you're trying it, and you're waiting and waiting and waiting, and you're basically able to collect a lot of data, try to create some new assumptions around it, try to create the content around it, and then get it out there and try it again. So I would say at this point in time, a lot of our forays at Wharton into personalization are around just beginning to understand what people look like beyond their names and what are their interests, and maybe we can at least target emails and lead nurturing emails based around their interests. And then that's why I'm so excited about Salesforce communities, is that inside of there they can self-select into groups that we've identified or created, but they're doing the work for us at that point in time. And if anybody is now posting into groups on entrepreneurship or real estate management or life in Philadelphia, they're the ones who are now sort of half driving the ship, and we're sort of guiding the collaboration between these students, and they're learning to connect to themselves rather than us doing all of the heavy lifting.
Maybe the more accurate question is the challenges to doing this. Is it the environment, the fact that it's so decentralized, it's hard to, you said herding cats earlier, Eric, is it at the challenge? Is it pure resources from a staff financial? Is it all of the above?
Yes.
You're saying all of the above.
Yes.
Is there a light at the end of the tunnel? Is there a pathway forward, I guess is what I would ask, that's been identified in the different campuses?
Yeah. I mean, I think the pathway is that, at the end of the day, this is about this is a bottom line. Marketing is, we're supporting bottom line goals. Like, this is business strategy. So the more you use that research that you have to understand your prospective students, and use that same research to tell your leadership how this is impacting your success or not.
Again, our experience is very different, but I just think that the data is really important there too, and streamlining systems. I mean, we have, the integration and making sure that, the work that admissions is seamlessly coming to us so that we can double down on our efforts and make sure that we're hitting the right audiences with the right material.
I'd say in the last several years, especially I'd say even in the last 12 to 18 months, after many years of conversations and prototypes and getting these things out there, that if you keep on basically, I said to somebody else, you just have to be a stubborn SOB sometimes, just keep on doing this stuff. But there's been a lot of conversations happening because, of course, we're not the only place where other people from around the school are hearing this. If they're paying attention, the drumbeat of data is everywhere. And so what can that affect? And I think it is frustrating, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It might be a little more difficult to get to, but in our particular environments, but I definitely think so.
I think one thing that helps are either natural or unnatural competitive shocks. So either you don't meet your enrollment goals and everyone starts freaking out, and you say, well, I have a solution. A little bit like we keep investing and thinking about competing. And then I just find people are of a competitive nature. So even at Lehigh, when we start to really dig in a little bit better, you talked about research about who we're winning and losing to. Because a lot of times when people see that, they get very fired up about, we should be getting those kids. Why are they choosing, school X, X, Y, or Z? So sometimes that competitive nature, either because tuition's at risk or just in general, you realize that, we are competing and these are the schools and we have the programs that can deliver to the, those types of kids. So, and I find that sometimes gets the energy behind it, and then obviously finding the right person who also can hear, like Eric has found, trying to find some of those people who can, obviously again get it for, and how do you move your agenda, forward and hiring.
Can I add an addendum?
Of course.
Thanks. Just wanted to make a pitch for the idea of a marketing technology office in your organization. You can read a lot about the tension between marketing and IT and how marketing can never do anything because they can't change the templates and IT doesn't want to fuss around with the templates because they did it once. And so, and that exists in almost everywhere. And when there's a great website called chiefmartech.com, started by a guy named Scott Brinker around 2008. And he really has begun pushing for this idea of having a dedicated team of marketing technologists working together. So in our team, in our marketing technology office, we have people who are programmers working side by side with people who are content developers, and they are constantly working together to devise new and crazy things to bring together. And creating that department was not easy. It took a long time, but it's like when you find out that there's 25 words for snow. Right now, you can describe all those things that you never thought you could before because now you have a language, you have a team, and it just really smooths things out a lot. So good luck, everybody.
Let's jump into the category then a little bit different. And Tricia, you mentioned authenticity earlier and the importance of authenticity. I think, and this is no offense to any of you up on this panel, but when prospective students or courses or even alumni see content from the institution, they take that with a grain of salt. If they see it from a current student, it carries more weight. So I'd be interested if you could each talk about how you're trying to utilize your current students as brand ambassadors, and not to make it too long-winded of a question, but then as a result of that, how you're balancing this need or desire to control your messaging, control your brand, stay on brand, with this need for authentic content that comes from the students. It doesn't appear to be filtered. And don't all jump at once.
I can finish.
I So I'm going to go back to social media again and talk about I think Eric mentioned earlier, just the number of sites specific to our school that are not owned by marketing and communications and that are sometimes started by students or clubs. So I think, part of our strategy moving forward is trying to, as Eric said, control that messaging a little bit, but only a little bit, right? Because you want them to be able to be speaking in their own voices and talking from a place that's meaningful to them. I mean, we are fortunate with our age group and the type of school that we are that we always, our sort of thing in our office is that we can't script our kids better than they can sell the school on their own. So there is always that balance of trying to sort of unleash them and also have some control over the messaging. And it's just a constant balancing act. It's having your hand on it, but not your fist.
So I'll give 2 examples. We're redoing our admission site right now and actually videotaping some students in their own words, because that's what the students want to come see. Will I fit? What are the kids like? So obviously we do that now. But of course we have the grand old view book, which, to your question before, the parents sort of want to see. And I've gotten that. I've had my own home research with 3 kids kind of approaching the college, and I see what comes in and who reads what and how much gets thrown out. So that's one example. And then I think another just amazing authenticity example we've had is we have a fairly new president. We got him involved in Instagram. He does it all himself. He's amazing at it. He has about 3,000 followers, and it was just like the most amazing thing for, I think, probably students, either current or looking at us, as well as alumni, to see what the president's doing, and it just exudes out the guy's pores, and that's just been an amazing sort of win as far as an idea of how to get people to tell what's going on at Lehigh in their own words, besides even a contrived marketing video with students.
Before I hand this over to you, I just want to add one more thing. Is that okay? I also alumni for us have been a great way to lend an authentic voice to things, particularly surrounding specific school traditions. On social, that's been a huge way to engage perspectives with alumni, just sort of showing their loyalty and going back to their memories and all that kind of stuff. That's been a big.
We have a few examples over the last couple of years of user-generated content. Right now, if you go on our homepage, there's a social media feed of the students who've been accepted and holding up their Next Stop Temple posters. But one of the really interesting ones that we launched not too long ago was we have a student blogger. We have a multimedia team, a couple of videographers on our staff, and we are working with one of our students right now who is blogging. And why that is really interesting is it's one of those examples of really hitting the prospective students where they are in the journey. So there's lots of talk about video and how successful video is, and we're using video for 15-year-olds now. The prospective students getting younger and younger, but then there's a lot of debate about how long the video should be, and it really does matter where they are in the journey, because what we're finding is, for instance, with our student blogger, because it's authentic, he's a student, he's just like them. His vlogs are 5 to 6 minutes long, and it's one of our most engaged videos on YouTube. So that's an example of when you are talking to your audience, where they are and where they want to be, they're going to engage.
Okay. So essentially, I know I keep talking about Salesforce communities. I get super excited by it. I'm not receiving a commission. But I suppose you can do the same thing with Facebook groups, but the Marketing and Communications Office has never been sort of overseeing any Facebook groups at the admissions level. But we are with Salesforce communities. And what it has allowed us to do inside of these communities is to bring on community ambassadors so the community is meant for high-quality prospective students, but the community ambassadors are either current students or alumni. And these prospective students just absolutely love hearing from the current students and the alumni. And yes, the admissions officers are on there too, but of course the real deal is coming from the ambassadors, and that's been very successful.
And have either of you, I imagine there's a lot of research involved, and I'm thinking about your vlogger in particular. Are you digging into other posts? Are you what's the process like in terms of user-generated content and amplifying it from your own brand? Because I imagine prospective students or alumni, they will click on that user's profile, and I imagine there's some research involved to make sure that what they find is not then going to come back against the brand that you've built. So could you talk me through a little bit about the process in terms of what the student is posting, if you're doing any research to find out what they are posting, and if you're making a determination, yes, this person is a brand ambassador versus no, they're not.
So in our community, they were specifically chosen at the outset and for that particular community. But we just recently launched a new community that's sort of the very beginnings of what will be a current student community. And one of the nice aspects of this community's tool is there's a whole metrics back end, a whole community manager where you can see what posts are being engaged with. There's whole leaderboards of people who have knowledge in certain topics, and you can really see how that's happening from a back-end standpoint, and which students are answering all of these questions and which are not, and you can begin to cultivate them more. There's also all kinds of language filters should you choose to. In our case, most of these people are already professionals out in the working world, and they recognize that this is not junior high. So they're going to be acting accordingly, but that's how we've been going about doing it.
Just some of your students are in junior high, so
True.
They are. Our student population tends to be, generally speaking, pretty enthusiastic about their experience. They're, they've done a lot and worked a lot, and their parents are paying a lot for them to enjoy it. So they're appreciative, and they can, we rely on them all the time. In terms of control, we don't relinquish as much control probably as my colleagues here do, because of the fact that they're younger. And so a lot of, I would say we have a smaller population in general. We are engaging on social media, so we're trying to get a conversation going all of the time. And but we have more sort of controlled contributions from our students. So, for example, we do the community meets in chapel twice a week, and students will give chapel talks that are sort of inspirational or reflective, and that kind of content we'll repurpose quite a bit. And then in terms of video, when we have them video or when they submit video, we'll piece it apart. We'll try to use it in lots of different ways, but generally speaking, we don't relinquish control to them very much.
In the limited time we have left, I want to try to tackle alumni marketing just a little bit here. And I'm curious how that's differing for your departments. So it's a very, not the stereotype, but it can be a less tech-savvy audience. They have different needs. I think the ROI of that communication is a little bit more challenging in some respects to measure. There are donations, but there's no easy enrollment or tuition check coming in. So I was wondering if you could each maybe just in a brief moment talk to me about how you're approaching your alumni marketing and what the challenges are for you in that. And some of that might, I imagine, be decentralization in those departments, but I don't want to speak for you.
So we actually, the one crossover with our central marketing group is we publish the alumni magazine, which is the gold standard, I guess, of 3 times a year. And why that's actually important, I think, to have in central communications is that is a very important piece, and also the antithesis of almost digital, which is everyone tried to make it digital, and then all the alumni scream, and then you bring it back. So we invest a lot in that content because I want that content for everything else. So it's just a nice cycle of having it in our group. Because I do think it's a very actually important physical touch point still. For going out. So I think it is, that's usually the biggest crossover with alumni content. But then, digitally you're trying to create a whole new wave of people who are interested, obviously, more in video and feeling that they're connected back. So we've done, several videos which really do help alumni feel, remember them back to hopefully their wonderful experience in the place and time.
I'm just going to tag on to that. We did similar, our office is responsible for our alumni magazine, and again, that content, I'll repeat what you said, is just so valuable to us across all other platforms as well. But we also did a video series that is something that we can sort of perpetually do for as long as it's valuable, called the Peddie Stories Project. And we've utilized our alumni, like our reunion weekends, to just pull alumni in for a really brief interview session where the room is set up and they speak to us for a couple of minutes, and it's against a black backdrop, so it's very simple, and we can span the generations of alums. And then that content, again, we can piece it apart, we can utilize it in lots of different ways, so it's been pretty successful.
So just really quickly, because this is another area where it can be very challenging, very different in institutions. Before I was at Temple, I was at Villanova, and I was in charge of advancement communications. At Temple, it's a very different dynamic, a very different relationship. So the one thing that I will say as a university marketing team, or if you're in a centralized marketing area, brand alignment is the most important thing that you can do. So whatever audience it is, if it's admissions, prospective students, enrollment, alumni and donor, athletics, if you can align the brand in those major areas, that should be your primary focus and your primary goal out of the gate. And once you can kind of move into those areas and align the brand across your enterprise, across your university, that should help kind of open some of the doors in some of the areas. And as you're doing that, obviously, you're learning more, as much as you can, about those audiences, and that'll kind of set you down the right path.
Eric, did you want to chime in?
No, thanks.
Sounds great. All right. Well, if everyone could just join me in giving our panel a quick hand here. Thank you very much. Once again, just thank you everybody for coming out. We really appreciate it.